Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you who are tuning in on the Life Online Radio Network, we welcome you in. For those of you listening in on YouTube, we welcome you in. Special thanks go out to our sponsors, Affinity Writing and Editing Services. That's at Affinity WES. You can get a hold of them on both Twitter and on Facebook. And trust me, if you need help with anything to do with writing, they are one of your best options to turn to. Reasonable rates, and they do absolutely outstanding work. Speaking of which, the show doesn't beg for Patreon support, makes nothing off of YouTube, but it still goes on. It's not in our method of operations to ask for a direct handout. This may change sometime in the future, but for now, no. There's a link in this description to the books we've authored, with more coming soon, and we'd be greatly obliged for you to purchase any of our books. Let's start off today's session with a little interesting fact I came up with, because like I said, I'm getting very tired of the financial doom and gloom, although I'll probably have enough material to last me for the next 5 years on that. This is supposed to be a show about anomalies, about the unusual. Yes, I understand economics just as well as I do the paranormal. Take that as you will. But right now, so much is bombarding us that I feel that I have to give time to the paranormal. Just recently, there was a study published, and it turns out, in Canada, there's a minimum of 3 sightings of UFOs every year. This at least doesn't sound particularly big, but you have to remember, compared to the United States, Canada is 1/10 its population. And that's spread out over a territory almost double its size. Add to the fact that most of the population in Canada is in the general area of the border with the United States. There's a few people up in Tuktoyaktuk, and there's a few people up in Moose Jaw, but most of the people live in cities like Toronto or Montreal, where you take a speedboat across and be in Buffalo, New York if you wanted. There's places in Saskatchewan, which are not very far from the capital, where you can literally walk across the border with no security whatsoever. So for a country with so few eyes on the sky, Canada has a very disproportionate amount of flying saucer sightings. Canada has also come forward and declassified their UFO documents before. So, like I was saying at the beginning of last week, this whole effort on the part of the United States to declassify their documents really looks like it's just another lateral move, just a way to make people feel like something's being done. It's been done before, and it resulted in nothing. No one's turning around saying, "Look what Canada did. Everybody should do that." Nope, it's kind of oh, look what Canada did. And that's the end. The funny part is, the Canadian, what am I going to call it? The Canadian Northwest is kind of a U.S. playground. If they want to hide something from their citizens, they got a place to hide it. They have shared airfields in Alberta, all over the place, where they could be launching who knows what kind of super secret technology. The Russians and the Chinese might have spies there, but the general media doesn't, so they can be very selective about what they let out and what they don't let out. And yet still, we get multiple UFO sightings a year, not all of which can be explained. And not all of which are explained successfully. My latest bone to pick with the paranormal is sleep paralysis. Everything is sleep paralysis. Do you encounter a ghost? It must be sleep paralysis. Even though you were awake at the time and had 16 cups of coffee, it still must be sleep paralysis. Do you feel shadow creatures in your basement? It's sleep paralysis. It doesn't matter that you live in a basement and you are awake listening to Ozzy Osbourne. Nope, it's still sleep paralysis. As somebody who suffers from sleep paralysis, most of the time, I don't see ghosts. I don't get any sort of weird supernatural phenomena. It has happened. I assure you that it has happened. But most of the time, sleep paralysis is just exactly what it says on the tin. You're paralyzed, it's tough for you to catch your breath, you're struggling, you can't move, and all of a sudden, bop, you wake up, everything's back to normal, and everybody's okay. I've experienced it in a number of different situations. Generally, I don't get it so much when my partner's with me. Well, she's snoring and I'm there half asleep because that's what sleep paralysis is. But generally that doesn't happen. Generally, even if she's in the next room, I can get it. But when she's there, I don't. And certainly she doesn't come into the room and say, "Hey, there's a ghost over there." And I don't feel that there's a ghost there. So, I'm getting tired of scientists throwing sleep paralysis at the wall. Getting tired of scientists throwing a lot of things at the wall. There's a study that was released saying that because we're not burning so much carbon, temperatures went up. That's right. In the pandemic, while you were staying at home and you were busy not running around in your cars doing whatever it is that you may be doing, the planetary temperature went up. Now there's two explanations for this, but nobody proposed it's part of a runaway effect. Nobody said that. They said despite the carbon levels going down, despite everything that we've been told, the heat levels went up. I don't know about you, but I'm sitting here with it's -10 outside plus wind chill, and I do agree in climate change. I don't agree with global warming. Now, the difference is, I've been watching over the past 20 years for sure, maybe a bit longer, and I've noticed the seasons aren't exactly syncing up. We used to get snow back in October. You knew going out for Halloween there was a possibility you'd be wearing your snowsuit and a mask, and that would be about it. But now we're not seeing snow until December, sometimes even January. And in return, it used to be March, everything would melt. And the saying, April showers bring May flowers, was commonplace. Nowadays, April showers mean nothing because it can snow again any time. And right up until May 24th, you're still out in a full jacket. It used to be you would wait for May 24th to plant seeds. Now I'm looking outside saying, we might have to push that back further. And this is all because there's less carbon in the air. How mysterious. Less traffic, and yet more temperature. This is partially because commercial transportation is still going, but commercial transportation is nowhere close to full capacity. Matter of fact, commercial transportation is doing rather poorly. A lot of places are getting bought out, they're getting sold out, they're getting hostile takeovers, and it's just because of the normal nonsense in the transportation world. But the signal it's giving to you and I, and to everybody else, is that there's no place for little fish in a big pond. And this is where we come to the second part of our discussion about not everybody is going to make it. I've had a chance to go further through the documentation that has been provided to me, and it looks even more grim. Where's a good place to start? First thing, while we have Mr. Schwab and Prince Charles going forth and outlining their idea for stakeholder capitalism, sounds wonderful, right? Everybody should be equal. A clerk should be valued as much as a shareholder. In theory, this sounds wonderful. In practice, it doesn't really work that well. You see, capitalism works when capital, money, currency, credit, whatever you want to call it, flows through the system. And it has to keep flowing in a loop. Original trickle-down economics had the idea that the money would keep flowing, without realizing that billionaires accumulate money and don't spend it. Now, taken on face value, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones on trickle-down economics. It's been disproven, it's been everything, but what worries me is stakeholder capitalism. You see, stakeholder capitalism runs directly in contrast to what we currently have, which is shareholder capitalism. And of course, debt capitalism. Shareholders and bondholders to a different extent. You see, a shareholder puts down their money, buys a piece of the company, say 20,000 shares, which amounts to 20% of the company, and they can sit on the board meetings and vote, etc. Bondholders hold the actual debt of the company. So while a shareholder can sit there and say, I'm putting my 20% towards voting that we produce a new product line, a bondholder can say, if you produce that product line, I'm pulling my shares in your bonds, they're going to drop, and next year when you go to apply for more debt, which every company does because it's kind of a way of borrowing from the future. If you put out 100,000 in bonds, you get that 100,000 now and you pay 5-10% over the next little bit, and then you can pay it back in future money. And future money is always worth less than present money. Just as they always will say in the 1920s, something that was worth 30,000 would be worth $1 million in today's money. That's exactly the same logic that the corporations use. They're saying in 5 years, inflation's going to happen. And if we can sell our debt now, then we can turn around and have that money now to invest, to do whatever, and we can do better than 5 to 8% on investing in whatever we're going to invest in, new products, new infrastructure, new technology, you name it. They're saying we're making a bet. We're saying in 5 years from now, we're going to be in a better position so that we're not even going to notice paying these bonds back. This is also what companies do. They sell treasury bonds in the expectation that by the time they have to pay them back, the money they're handing out will be worth less than the money that they initially received. It's a beautiful game. However, bondholders, interestingly, have not officially been recognized in the stakeholder capitalism model. Without bondholders being there, although I doubt anybody would be crazy enough to get rid of them, the shareholders and the employees are the remaining stakeholders, and the board, of course. This becomes problematic, shall we say. Because are you willing to take on a bond when you're not considered an equal shareholder? And even if they do figure out a way to work bondholders into it, what exactly are shareholders and stakeholders expected to do? Well, a few years ago in 2006, some people in Pennsylvania got together and they created the BLab Corporation. BLab of Pennsylvania. Go ahead and Google it if you want. I can always be put on pause. I can always be put on hold. But the purpose of this BLab was to establish B corporations, B Corp. Yes, B Corp. For those of you who've been in the military, they chose that phrase on purpose. B Corp sounds like they're military. They have their stuff together. They are an authoritative, controlling body. But they're a nonprofit. They're a complete nonprofit that was founded in Pennsylvania in 2006. The reason I mention Pennsylvania over and over again, Pennsylvania, United States of America, is that their major impact has been in Europe. And they do most of their business in Europe. This is because they found a more receptive audience in Europe. The United States still has the attitude of, oh, you're talking about equality, that's going to be communism and socialism and collectivism and etc. But they are pushing their way through. There have been 27 states in the United States that have passed laws favorable to BLab's purpose. And in Europe, countries like France and Italy have all passed laws favorable to them. One notable exception is Britain. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that a Pennsylvania company does business in Britain, and it's a non-profit, is because Britain is the home of the City of London. Not London City as you know it, but the City of London. It's a square mile in the center of London where even the Queen must be granted permission to go there. It's where the world's banks go to set up shop. So Britain has no particular interest in pursuing an equalitarian, stakeholder-centered corporation model. Quite the opposite. They stand to make a heck of a lot of money by being a place where you can stash your cash. The other interesting thing that BLab has done in connection with Prince Charles and Mr. Schwab is B corporations through BLab are a complete non-profit. So they are convincing at least 250 businesses, and that's from the list that I read last year. I'm sure more have signed on now. But they've convicted 250 humongous businesses to sign on, including BASF, Quebec Hydro, and one that has a title so long, government agency, that I couldn't even begin to pronounce it if I tried to. Why on earth would a company, with the interest of appeasing its shareholders, which is ultimately its purpose, sign into a company, a non-profit company, and adhere to their rules? That's a little bit hard to completely explain, so we kind of have to look at the rules that a B Corp has to adhere to. Now, one of the things that they claim is that companies must be clear and transparent. Yeah. The companies will be clear and transparent, all right. We're talking about companies that regularly offshore industries, money, investments. These are people that know how to shuffle past and get out of harm's way the first second you mention audit. They're going to be clear and transparent about as much as a black garbage bag is transparent. Clear and transparent. It's wonderful. The only problem is BLabs doesn't really have an audit system. For those of you who are old enough, remember back when they were implementing ISO, International Standards Organization, and there's different ISOs depending on your industry. There's 9001, there's 9002, 9010, etc., etc. And all ISO was a way to make sure that all your company's documentation was online. And for those of you who worked through it, it was a nightmare to implement, making sure everybody was online, putting through the same information, etc. People had to scan documents onto hard drives and print them out and stuff like that. It was maniacal. And in the end of it, all those companies that claim their ISO, today, no one cares about it anymore. They gave up on that within 10, 15 years. If I hand you a business card saying I'm ISO certified, the only thing you're going to ask is, what is ISO certification? The companies that still use it are the big three, GM, Chrysler, Ford, because that way they can submit their orders in a standardized package and everything prints out automatically. It's a wonderfully set up system for them, but for most other companies, it doesn't make sense. Like if you and I were to start a chain of lemonade stands. I love using the lemonade stand because everybody understands the economics of a lemonade stand. We would not be able to be ISO certified, and it wouldn't make sense for our business plan to be ISO certified. Because we are dealing in small numbers at this point. We know our employees face to face, because if we didn't interview them, then we're going to be inspecting the place at some point. The shareholders and the CEOs and whoever you want to say it wouldn't know their frontline workers except for extremely rare circumstances. Jeff Bezos just stepped down from Amazon. I bet you he wouldn't know half of the people that work for him. The people in the warehouses, the people who sort things, the people that process orders, and the people who look after his systems. No, he knows his board of directors. He knows the people around him. That's pretty much it. Especially now that he's decided to step down. He probably hasn't visited anywhere in a year. Although I bet you he has a hell of a farewell tour. Anyways, back to being accountable. So corporations are expected to audit themselves and submit that paperwork or application, whatever you want to call it, to a nonprofit organization. How do you figure that's going to work? I already know from experience that a lot of things get hidden in safety and compliance. So when you start asking corporations, like, how many deaths are attributable to your organization, suddenly companies like Apple and Android and IBM and all those guys are going to get very nervous, because for years and years now, they have found that they can just simply outsource stuff to China, to India, to Vietnam, to all those countries, and not have to worry about the consequences. Yet, they all signed on the dotted line. They all want to be part of this reset of capitalism. Now, us with our lemonade stand, it's extremely unlikely any of our employees are going to get poisoned by the lemonade. Not unless we really mess our jobs up. But say we want to expand from lemonade to lemonade and coffee. Again, not likely, but milk can go bad, especially on a hot summer day. And our employees might decide to have some bad milk as part of the day, and maybe then there's a slight chance of somebody getting injured. Would we report this? Yes, because we're honest people. But corporations spend millions of dollars a year in trying to keep themselves away from any sort of responsibility, both for litigation purposes and so that way they don't have to declare anything. Because a lot of countries and a lot of states require that sort of information. So the way companies like to get around that is to spread it around. Yes, you have an operation in China. Yes, you have an operation in India. Yes, you have an operation in Vietnam. Yes, you have one in Mexico. You keep them separate. And maybe your one in Vietnam has had a bad year. A typhoon struck while your workers were there and the bosses refused to let them go home. So what companies love to do is to fold one corporation, absorb it, spin it around, spin it off, whatever it takes. And they do it all the time. Whenever you hear about a company renaming itself, it's not doing it just because it wants to. I mean, how many years did the Washington Redskins stand firm that they were never going to change their name? And all of a sudden this year, it suits them to change their name. Their owner, I can't remember his name at the moment, didn't have a sudden change of heart. It just suddenly became convenient for him to be able to start again. He still has his franchise rights, he still has everything, but if he renames, he can start everything all over again. How do you think about transparency now when people can just rename and go on with their lives? The people who are supposed to look after this transparency are the investors. I say again, they are the investors. So, the stockholders, the very people we're supposed to be shifting away from, are the ones reported on the accountability of the organization. Not the stakeholders, not the person who works hard every day to make sure all the books are set and all the accident reports are set and everything is set up the way everybody wants it to be, but the shareholders. The CEO, the board of directors, and the shareholders still retain their power. To use the exact term, investor stewardship is vital. I'll read a bit from this document. Investors have an important stakeholder role to play in endorsing and holding businesses to account. For example, by voicing endorsement of green transitions at AGMs and asking companies to adopt science-based targets or similar third-party benchmark methods. It sounds like a lot of gobbledygook, doesn't it? And it is. So they're forcing the stakeholders to say, I want to be part of this company. Stock market doesn't work that way. Never has, never will. Just as they showed with GameStop in the past couple weeks, the market goes the way it's going to go. So maybe you're an investor, maybe you have a lot of money, in which case, God bless, I bear you no ill will, and I hope you have continued profits. But the same token, you're looking mostly for a return on your investment. You do have ethical concerns. You're not going to invest in Slavery Incorporated. The same token, you don't go through the balance sheet of every single company. You see IBM drops $10 and you want to get some IBM shares. You're going to buy IBM. It's a blue chip stock. If you knew about the GameStop thing, you don't care if the workers are only getting paid minimum wage an hour, have to have a knowledge base of all the video games and all the systems, and put up with all those people that are coming in and say, I played this game, I saw this video where the character had to defeat a whole bunch of turtles. Are they talking Mario? Are they talking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Are they talking some independent game? That's the kind of thing the frontline employees go through every day that you cannot expect a shareholder to know. They know their product is video games in this case, or lemonade in our little example. And that's really all they care about it. Are they meeting their investment targets? Fantastic. Then let's put our money in. They don't have the time, nor the interest, nor the capability to monitor every single transaction in the company. But that's ultimately who Mr. Schwab and the Prince are trying to put the emphasis on. Not the companies. Again, the companies are not held by any law. They're not bound by any particular set of structures, only by their willingness to sign into a non-profit organization that was created in Philadelphia and now is very concerned in Europe. No shareholders do that. Donald Trump didn't become a billionaire investing in shares like that. I hate to use him constantly, but he's someone who's very popular and he's very well known. I can't wait for more popular people to step up. Like Elon Musk, for example. He didn't make his money by going out and investing in particular companies. He knew what he wanted to do from day one. He was behind cryptocurrency in a certain manner. He then started investing in private space ventures. I would say even he doesn't know what's going on in his companies. No offense to him. I think he's a smart man. Despite the hatchet piece I did to him, I still think he's a smart man. There's a lot of smart people who are not admirable. But that's neither here nor there. Whether they know what's going on in their company or Elon Musk, I would actually understand it, and Mr. Trump, I would understand it, because they're both in charge of so many companies. There's no way you can possibly manage it. At best, you would have representatives reporting to you. You'd read the email, whatever it might be, saying, profits down in Sector 5, we're initiating investigation procedures. Okay, keep me updated. Now, the curious thing, this brings us back to the beginning of this episode. Written into this big document, The Future of the Corporation, written by Mr. Schwab, Decarbonize the Supply Chain. And, sorry, this one's a little harder to read. The next frontier is to decarbonize its own operations and drive full carbonization for the supply chain. While the target is set for 2040, strategic top suppliers are being asked to begin the journey now by setting targets, taking immediate action, and setting plans to decarbonize no later than 2040. So in 19 years, we're expected to decarbonize. Remember what I said earlier about how we put out fewer emissions, and yet the temperatures are still going up? Carbon is a worrisome gas. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying do nothing. I've said before, and I'll say it again, I'm against pollution, 100% against pollution. It drives me nuts, just nuts, when I see people coming out of a grocery store and, dropping their gloves on the floor. Because I used to be one of the guys that picked that up. And you know what? I've cleaned up parks, I've cleaned up all sorts of things, and the horrible things people leave behind is just disgusting. It's disgusting that another human being would do that. Decarbonizing the supply chain is incredibly ambitious. First of all, there's these things called planes. Yeah, it's really hard to decarbonize a plane. In the 50s, the United States was trying to fly them off a nuclear reactor. There have been experiments with electric planes and all sorts of things, but having them run on pure hydrogen is dangerous. Hydrogen has this nasty habit of blowing up, as the Hindenburg showed. Now, we're 90 years beyond the Hindenburg technology, but at the same token, that would be a very dangerous move to take forward. And airlines, aircraft, and space launches are still showing we have not mastered aerospace technology. So what, we're just going to write a big blank check for the airline industries and say, don't worry about it, we'll get you later? No. Trucking companies, I'm going to come back to them again. I'm sorry, but I know the industry very well. I know the ways things get from one place to another. Trucking companies, let's pick on them. A lot of them save money by reconditioning older trucks. And even if you give them until 2040, that's 19 years in the future, say today, right now, you guys have that deadline. And remember, it's a target deadline and they're hoping people can go faster. There is biofuel available. There are alternatives to gasoline, but biofuel still puts out carbon. And switching anything over to hydrogen or electric or anything like that is a big deal for any company. Imagine, each truck is about $300,000 to $400,000 each. That's just the tractor, no trailers. Trailers are about $50,000 to $100,000, not including any logos you might want to put on them. And goodness sake, if those are heated trailers or refrigerated trailers, that's a massive amount of equipment for one company. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of transportation companies. How are they supposed to decarbonate? Ships. Some of the container ships have been on the oceans already for 40, 50 years. And they're scheduled to keep going. They're busy burning oil like greedy gluttons at a bar somewhere. They have no plans to retire them. They're ships. I mean, you can't just turn around and build a new ship. It takes years. You got to engineer it. You got to get the designers in. You got to build the thing. There's only so many slipways where ships can go down in the present day. We have plenty of cars, we have plenty of trucks, but ships require a long time to replace. I would say it would be easier to replace the number of aircraft that are currently around than it would be to replace the ships. And we still haven't even looked at residential, consumer, regular person on the road. I have a neighbor just down the street, man who builds cars. He does a fantastic job. He's taking me out for a ride, and these things can kick when they go. Now, rebuilding cars isn't one of my hobbies, but at the same token, I appreciate the art this man has put into it. But he needs to put gas in it. Gasoline. So what, is he going to have to rebuild the car yet again? And does that mean it's no longer a classic car, so that way it loses that tag? Like, classic cars are a big investment, and they go for big money. It's a very niche market, but you never know. I have a gasoline car in my driveway right now with no plans of replacing it, possibly not even by 2040 if I get a little luck. Though probably will have to. But that's the problem. There's so many ways oil and gas are used, decarbonizing the supply chain is virtually impossible. What about power? Yes, a lot of places have hydroelectric power, but there's still a lot of places that have coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear. So once again, let's pretend, let's wave our magic wand, and in 20 years, everybody is not burning oil, natural gas, or coal. Fantastic. So are we all on nuclear energy? Did we suddenly discover a lot more lakes that we could put dams on? Solar is great, but at the same time it's not perfect. It takes up a lot of room and can do a lot of damage, and every 20 years you need to replace it. Wind power, not bad, but I mean, we have experimental turbine rotors by the lakeshore. And it's an experiment. It's wonderful to see it happening, but it's been experimental for about the past 15, 20 years. So they better start hustling on this sort of stuff. But even assuming they get power coming online in the next 20 years from somewhere other than nuclear, at least fission, because fission is the one that breaks apart the atom. So when you break down uranium or thorium, this is one thing I've never understood. The United States wants to go around and wave its flag and tell Korea and tell Iran they don't want them to have nuclear power. And I think to a certain degree, North Korea and Iran have been justified in saying you don't have the right to do that. Uranium is a pretty dangerous element. It's poisonous to mine, it's difficult to refine. Once you put it in there, you have 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. The Canadian system called CANDO is wonderful because it has safeguards built in, but at the end of the day, you still got a bunch of nuclear waste that's going to be around for 100,000 years or more. The same basic technology can be used with thorium. As a matter of fact, the Canadian reactors don't need to be converted at all. Thorium needs a little bit of fissile material with it to get it started, whether it be plutonium or something similar. The difference is, unlike United States-style reactors, which are called breeder reactors because they're making more plutonium and more stuff that can make bombs, because that's their entire purpose, it's not to make power, and so that way they can wind up with more bombs and more stuff that they can end people with. So, if you really wanted to stop Iran and North Korea and whatever other nation from developing nuclear power, instead of sitting there saying, oh, we're going to blow you up, the smart thing to do, the intelligent thing to do would be, okay, we have thorium technology from the 1950s that is just as good, and together we can develop this. We can make it safe together. I know Iran would probably jump at the opportunity just to be able to say, okay, fine, we'll take thorium and you stop bugging us with economic sanctions. North Korea, they're a little bit hard to figure out, but at the same token, if you gave them something safe, I'm sure they'd be delighted to take it. Although probably both countries would keep working on their nuclear bomb programs because they're both surrounded by nuclear people on all sides. North Korea by Russia and China. In Iran, they've got Pakistan on one side, supposedly Israel on the other side, although Israel has never admitted their nuclear capability. But then again, South Africa never admitted its nuclear capability until the very end when they said, hey, guess what? We got nukes. The point of all this is to decarbonize the supply chain in 20 years is not only a monumental task, but it's darn near impossible. Now the curious thing, 2040 is kind of the time frame where Elon Musk wants to be permanently off planet Earth. He's bought into these projects, he's signed on the dotted line, but he's already saying he's going to Mars and he will not be bound by the same laws that are on Earth. Granted, there's not really very many petrocarbons on Mars, and even if you did, it would be very difficult to burn them the same way that you do on Earth. He's not planning on following any of this. He's planning on his Earthbound companies doing it, but his Mars companies and settlements and kingdom, let's call it what it is, his kingdom up there won't need to worry about carbon at all. They might even be trying to make as much as possible to make it into a greenhouse gas and make Mars a little bit more habitable. So he's literally saying one thing here and doing something else there. For somewhat valid reasons, but still. There's a man who we know is talking out of both sides of his mouth already. I wish him luck because I want humanity to be able to get off this planet. The same token, I see the hypocrisy in his statements. One of the final things that we want to talk about is adopting science-based targets or similar third-party benchmark methods. Science-based targets, that's really difficult because the first science that most companies employ are economics, and companies are supposed to grow in profit. Until companies go from an exponential growth model to a linear growth model, which means instead of doubling every year, they just want to be going up once, then two, then three, then four, just simply arithmetically. Instead of doubling the next year, doubling your profit, then next year, doubling your profit. And this has been the problem with companies since I was in high school and first learning about this stuff. Exponential growth is simply unsustainable. And supposedly this whole thing is about sustainability. Love that idea. Love that word. Love sustainability. Don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. And it's a shame. Sustainability should be the byword for which we all are chipping in on. But since I can't trust people not to throw their gloves out after they're done shopping into the disposal bins, how can I expect a company full of perhaps 50 or 100 of those individuals to even put their paper trash in the garbage, or not even the garbage, recycling bin? And do you know how many companies I personally know of without recycling bins? It would scare you. Or that just simply dump the recycling bins into the garbage. Either way, it is irresponsible as heck. So what scientific way would we ask a company to put into place when they are the ones who are deciding how to record and report their information to a third party? We actually have a test case for this. Danone. Yes, the yogurt people. Because they applied for their B Corp certification from our wonderful friends at BLab. And you know what? They were approved in 2018. Curiously, this is not on the official B Corp or BLab website. It's in International Monetary Fund report about how wonderful a job Denon has done in being accepted, then it's signed, sealed, and delivered. But for some reason, BLab, based in Pennsylvania, operating in Europe, can't self-report. And this is the very thing they're asking their companies to do, to self-report. When you think about it, the very company that's imposing the deadlines can't keep their records up to date. They're based in Pennsylvania, they do their business in Europe, and they're being pointed to as the example, as the very thing that other companies should follow. And that is the Great Reset in a nutshell. Shuffling the deck. It'll be decarbonization, except there's going to be exceptions. Everybody's going to be kinder, gentler, and treating their employees better, except where it isn't reported. We're going to have wonderful new technology and great standards and everything, except where it doesn't. I've always firmly believed there should be some things run by the government and some things run by private companies. Hospital, for example. A hospital should never be for profit. A hospital should aspire to deliver the best service they can within a budget, but the same token, they shouldn't be looking to make money. That's why I think government hospitals are a little bit better. Because they're run by the government, they're run by people with an interest. They're kind of more stakeholder-oriented than any corporation will be. The opposite would be cars. Cars, trains, planes, automobiles, etc. I believe that is best run by private individuals. Because individuals are more innovative, more creative, and able to move with the times. Go back to our lemonade company. The government doesn't need to run a lemonade company. They can inspect it, they can certify it, they can tax it, but they have no business running a lemonade company. Don't really have a problem with government liquor stores, don't really have a problem with private liquor stores. I just want it to be one or the other. I've seen zero difference in price between the two, so no opinion there. But like I said, think of a hospital and think of a car company. A car company is definitely better run by shareholders and board members, and a hospital is definitely run better by a government. When we start burying who controls what under different levels, it's easy for conspiracy theories to start happening. Because this BLab, who the heck are they? Who the hell do they think they are? Putting in their stake with Prince Charles and Mr. Schwab, the IMF. These guys have only been around for 14 years, but they're already invited to the top conferences with all the bigwigs at the big tables. And the Brookings Commission is one of the people who have contributed to this report. You might remember the Brookings Commission. They are the ones who recommended that if the government ever found evidence of extraterrestrial life, they should bury it, because the people weren't ready. It would cause societal collapse. Now with E.T., whatever science fiction you want to put out there, Stargate, Fifth Element, all sorts of things. And people are kind of used to the idea of aliens. I would say it would surprise virtually nobody for aliens to come down and say, let us see your leader. We'd have more questions for them than fear. You know, like, hey, where you been, where you come from, that kind of thing. But here is the Brookings report that's a think tank that's been around and is demonstrably wrong about a few things, hooking up with BLab, which is also a think tank and a non-profit created within the last 14 years. So we have the old and the young putting in their lines together to try to make this, how am I going to call it, this amalgamation work together. Well, it's not a conspiracy theory yet. I just document what is happening. And BLab somehow in 14 years has established itself as the authority on how to keep everybody in line through letting them self-report. I'm not an old fella, I'm not a young fella. I'm hoping to still be around in the year 2040 to see what things are like. When my time comes, I accept that. I'd like to live for a long time, see the kids grow up, have a nice long life, that sort of thing. But the way things are right now, I'm not particularly optimistic. Let's go back to the lemonade stand yet again. You have a lemonade stand. We're doing pretty good. We have a couple franchises that we open. And then something like this pandemic hits. We can't afford our real estate costs, our rentals, all that thing. We got to shut our business down. And it's not small businesses that are being affected by all this B company and stakeholder interest, that sort of thing. No. It's not for you. These are the big players. You, if you have a business where you sell clothing out of your basement, or if you have an eBay account where you're able to sell energy drinks, whatever it is you might be doing, you're just a small fish. I get a lot of people telling me, but Silverlight, I have gold, I have silver, I have stock in this, and I have stock in that. Still a small fish. Don't know how things are going. Gold has been taken away from everybody before, and it can be again. It's just a matter of them writing it out and getting the right people in place to pass it. And this is where we run into our biggest problem. You might be in a stakeholder situation. Maybe you do have a boss that already treats you well, and you're looking forward to this saying, Silverlight, what are you so worried about? Well, BLab has a very good track record of keeping what it does a secret. Look at their Wikipedia page. For everything about them, it's maybe 100, maybe 200 words long. You have to dig so deep into their documents, and that's where I always start to smell a rat. If you, again, we have a lemonade stand, we would be the first to come out and say, we make lemonade. If we were a think tank, we would like to say, okay, we've done work for Chrysler, we've done work for Bata Shoes, and we've done work for Swatch. We would be the first to come out and triumph what we have done. But this, the way it's all constructed, is very Byzantine. Everybody is self-reporting, everybody is making things up, and they're adopting new titles. B companies. You know what a C company is? A C company is a regular company. I think a D is a non-profit. I only read that quickly, and it's been a little bit, so I might have that part wrong. But B and C companies, B are supposedly stakeholder-run, and C are regular shareholder-run companies. So I'll leave you with that to think about. You're not invited to the big boys' party. Sorry to my beautiful women who listen. Sorry to anybody of minorities, but you're simply not invited. That's not the way they do things. You're invited to my party. I just can't have a party at the present time because we're all locked down. But that sure as heck didn't stop Elon Musk from launching a rocket, did it? We can't leave the house, but he can launch a rocket into space. Sorry, there's two levels of the economy. I keep trying to drive this home. And we're not in the one that gets to make decisions. We're not all going to make it financially. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I think they're going to open the economy and close it down because things just are going to cough and sputter and go insane. And then they're either going to have to go to a universal basic wage or straight flat out welfare. I haven't really figured that part out yet. I'm waiting for another couple months to see what happens because Easter is coming. Remember New Year's? Everybody decided to go out for New Year's, and we got a big, massive spike, and everybody shut everything down. Easter's coming. Gosh darn it, it's my right to go and visit people on Easter. Yeah, it's your right. I agree. But the same token, it's not helping anybody. And whether the numbers are real or fake or whatever you want to call them, right now we've got to get away from fake numbers. And the only way to do that is to knuckle down and try to keep things going. We don't have real numbers on the pandemic. We don't have real numbers on what the economy is doing. We never have real numbers. Except from one source, Silverlight, because I always make sure to give you the best information I have. We wish to thank you for joining the Silverlight Show. Thank you once again. As a reminder, this show is entirely free, supported only by our literature, which is available at pandemic pricing at 99 cents an ebook on Amazon. We're looking to spread to other platforms, give people more choices. But anyways, thank you everybody once again, and have a great day.